Hello and welcome. Could Islamic justice be coming to the UK? Some officials argue that it has, in fact, already arrived. Britain's leading judge, Lord Phillips, caused a controversy recently by saying there may be a place for Sharia or Islamic religious law in the UK. The Chief Justice was echoing sentiments expressed by the Church of England's Archbishop of Canterbury, Rowan Williams, earlier this year when he said that adopting some aspects of Sharia law was inevitable. Many of Britain's Muslims already seek the guidance of Islamic scholars and leaders to settle their disputes, but opponents of the idea argue that any formalization of the system would cause chaos, setting up a parallel legal system that threatens the rights of women and divides the nation. On today's show, we look at the role of Sharia law in the UK and whether or not it is right for Great Britain. Joining us for this discussion from Paris is Stephen Hockman, a senior practicing barrister and former chairman of the Bar Council of England and Wales. He argues that there is a role for Sharia law in the UK. In London, we have Shaista Gohir, a government advisor on Muslim women and the director of Muslim Voice UK and the Muslim Women's Network. She's opposed to the idea of Sharia law, arguing that the vast majority of Britain's Muslims don't want it. Also in London is Taji Mustafa, a member of the Executive Committee of Britain's Hizb ut-Tahrir, a global Islamic political party. He favours Sharia and says it's already working well for British Muslims. Welcome you all to the show. And Stephen Hockman in Paris, I've got to start by asking, you support the idea of Sharia law in Britain. I wonder why you feel there is the need. What is missing in the British legal system that necessitates the requirement of Sharia?
Well, thank you very much and good evening. Let me make it clear, first of all, that in my view, everyone who lives in this country should be subject to English law and should be subject to the jurisdiction of the English courts. And I'm quite certain that that is also the view, incidentally, although I can't, of course, speak for them, of the Lord Chief Justice and the Archbishop of Canterbury. But my starting point really is this. As I look around me in a society in which there are now a very large number of Muslims in this country, it seems to me that society is nevertheless somewhat fragmented, that there are improvements that we need to make. And the question is how we should achieve greater cultural harmony and greater cultural integration. And my belief is that one way in which we might be able to achieve that is by reaching out in a positive and constructive way to those in other cultures, for instance, people who do respect Sharia law and who abide by its principles, and ask ourselves whether there are elements in that culture which might reasonably be incorporated into ours. Now, some steps have been taken in that direction already, and it seems to me very well worthwhile to explore whether further steps can be taken. And if we do that, if I can just add this one further point, if we do that, then it seems to me that we are better placed to invite a comparably constructive response from people who do respect Sharia law and who abide by Islam in supporting and respecting our traditions as well.
Now, I'll get on to some of the debate around this, but I have to ask you, it was quite surprising for many people that the Lord Chief Justice and the Archbishop of Canterbury both got involved and were vocal on this. What made them come forward with this particular viewpoint and this statement?
Well, I think that as a matter of sort of timing, it was the Archbishop of Canterbury's speech in the Royal Courts of Justice, at which Lord Phillips was in the chair, which, so to speak, prompted this debate. An interesting and quite profound speech, I think, as the Lord Chief Justice has himself subsequently said, and perhaps somewhat misunderstood. I do stress that neither of them was suggesting, and I am certainly not suggesting, that we should have some kind of parallel system of courts in this country. What I am suggesting is that there is scope for much greater cultural interchange and perhaps interchange in terms of the incorporation of legal principles between our system and that of Islam, although I hasten to say that I'm sure that I know next to nothing about it compared with your other two guests.
Well, I want to actually get Shaista Gohir in here and ask why you object to the idea of Sharia law being part of the UK system.
Okay, as a Muslim, I believe that Islam delivers equality and justice. So in principle, I don't have a problem with Sharia if it's applied correctly, justly and fairly. What I'm against is the implementation and the interpretation of Sharia because of the heavy cultural influence that exists, particularly when it comes to women's issues. Now, if you look around the Muslim world, the way that Sharia law is implemented and interpreted varies enormously, and particularly when it comes to women's issues. So I can't understand how a Sharia law would be applied here, how all the Muslims and the Muslims in the UK are so diverse, how they would agree to a single interpretation. That is absolutely impossible. And also, if miraculously everyone did actually, agree to a single interpretation, I feel that there would be a lot of pressure on the weak and the vulnerable, particularly Muslim women, to use official courts. And they may not want to, they may be pressurized by family, by their communities. And I feel that the mindset here of Muslims is heavily also influenced by culture, so I feel that they will be discriminated against. And also on these Sharia councils, normally you have 10 to 12 men. Will women allowed to be a part of the Sharia boards? Can 50% of those be women? I don't think they will be, so I just believe that women will be discriminated against, and I can't think of a Muslim country around the world that where Muslim women, the way Sharia is applied there is done correctly and fairly. So I can't really see it being done here.
Let me ask you then. I know you're sort of quoted as saying that according to surveys you've seen, the vast majority of Muslims in Britain would be against the idea of Sharia law being part of the UK legal system. I'm just wondering where you get those figures. I know that when Gallup did a poll, they sort of
That's right.
about
There's been a number of surveys. I actually run a Muslim Voice UK, which is a polling organisation, but there's been other mainstream pollsters that have done surveys. Now, the results are very similar. 60% actually do not want Sharia law, so I don't even know why we are actually debating this issue. Now, 40% actually want it, but even that's debatable because the 40% that do want Sharia family law, I don't think they actually understand the implications of it, and they don't actually understand practically how it would be applied and what would actually happen realistically, and that women would be discriminated against. And if they do understand that, when I've been having conversations with people and when I actually explain the reality of the situation, so many people say, oh, actually we've changed our mind, we don't want Sharia law. So you'll probably end up with only a few percent, a tiny minority that want Sharia law in this country. I mean, we have unofficial Sharia boards anyway. If people want a Sharia ruling, they can go to those unofficial bodies that are serving their communities, and we can go to mosques. So why fix something that's not broken? And to be honest with you, I think for Muslims that are asking for Sharia law in this current climate of Islamophobia is quite divisive. It's going to divide the society and divide Muslim communities. Surely we should try and get our own house in order and look at the way that informal Sharia councils operate, because I do see problems with them. Are the imams that sit on these Sharia council, is there a benchmark? Do they have to meet certain standards? Right. I know there are unqualified imams operating in mosques in the UK on Sharia boards. Surely we should actually fix our own informal system first before asking it to be legalised. Well,
now, Shaista, let me get Taji Mustafa into this debate as well from London. And I know that you talk about Sharia law already being practiced in the UK, and actually being applied already. Now, how do you think the majority of Muslims would vote? I know that Shaista Gohir says that the majority, she sees it, wouldn't want to vote for Sharia law in the UK. But why is it you feel that it does work?
Well, I think I need to be very clear in terms of we need to put this discussion in context. Globally, there has been a global revival of Islam. That translates, it means that in the Muslim world, people call for the system of Sharia, which is the social, political, economic implementation of the rules that come from the Sharia. And that is when you have an Islamic state, the Caliphate, the Khilafah, which implements those rules. That's what people are calling for in the Muslim world, and that enjoys huge public support across the Muslim world. University of Maryland poll says over 70% of people want that. We had a huge conference in Indonesia last year. Nearly 100,000 people turned up, mostly women calling for Sharia, calling for the Caliphate. Muslims in the UK are part of that global trend. And that means that increasingly they are looking to address their personal issues, their personal lives, and to live according to Islam. You hardly find any Muslim who doesn't want to solve their inheritance issues, their financial matters, their marriage, their divorce, the upbringing of their children by referring to Islam. So it's not Sharia as a system here in the UK, rather it's people are already voluntarily finding judgments from Islam and abiding by that. That is only natural, that is only to be expected from Muslims living in a Western society. And I think there are two reasons for that. One is Muslims believe in Islam, so it's natural to look to Islam for answers to problems. Two is, in the West, we have to admit, with a secular West, there are now huge problems facing society. We have huge knife crime epidemic here in the UK. We have the sexualization of women. We have inequality. We have a very militaristic foreign policy. Secular society is breaking down. David Cameron, a prominent politician here, talked about, broken Britain. Bearing that in mind, it's natural Muslims look to Islam. So this formal arrangement is only to be expected, and it's ahead of the debate. Muslims are already formally implementing solutions from Islam in their personal life.
Okay.
And I think to say that people are calling for a system here, that doesn't have a reality. That's not the case.
Okay, well, before we take a break, I just want to get a quote that came from Sarfraz Sarwar, a Muslim community leader in Leyden in Essex, who came up with this quote. He said, "If anybody is caught with a knife, then give them 10 lashes in the town centre. Sharia law is not controversial. It is a deterrent. Muslim countries don't have half of the problems we have because Sharia law is there." Now, we'll discuss that and hopefully take some calls as well coming up after this break when our debate on Sharia in the UK continues. Stay with us.
I think it's a good idea, but I don't think it's possible because this country already has a system, and the system wouldn't allow for another system to be in place.
Look, we have a very large Muslim community now, and if they want it, providing it doesn't clash with anybody else, I don't see why not.
Under Sharia law, you have to follow the law of the country. So whether it's parking or housing or immigration or being illegal, you can't do that. Under Islamic law, that's a misconception. You see, you're not allowed to do that. It might, in Saudi Arabia, there might be different laws, but whatever the laws of this country are, we have to follow them.